zone, but there has been enough based on what the National Weather Service is analyzing to at least get a tornado warning to be issued for this region. It's in effect until 5:45. So it's many areas getting in on rain right now, but not every location will be getting in on tornadic activity. We're now going to start to focus more on these individual pockets within this broader expanse of rain and thunder, and some of those can maybe trigger a little local zone of brief temporary spin. When we call tornado a spin-up tornado, that's essentially what we're looking at, because this is embedded within a broader expanse of gusty, turbulent winds within the atmosphere. And within any real portion of this area, we can see at least a slight trend of brief, quick spin that can gather just enough to warrant even a brief tornado touchdown. You don't have to have one that touches the ground and stays on the ground for miles and miles to cause some kind of concern. So because of the movement of this and its positioning around the county line, if you are down from this along 267, maybe around the Helen Tower area, the Hilliardville area where 267 meets with Spring Hill Road, that's a point where you need to be concerned about the future movement of this. And now we see that the warning zone there is flashing purple because there is at least some basis on radar data that there can be something that actually touches the ground and maybe causes some debris to be lifted into the atmosphere, or at least the lower part of the atmosphere. So again, there is the possibility that a little bit of extra spin or at least just some concentrated strong gust of wind that can maybe circulate around a somewhat weaker overall twisting motion within this portion of the thunderstorm. There is the indication that we do have enough of that pattern being detected on radar to where there's enough evidence for at least the National Weather Service to say this is a confirmed tornado by radar observation. So I cannot toss the break unless I'm being directed by the news director, because this is an active tornado warning. And we want to make sure that we continue to stay on top of this. There is at least some little indication based on the overall debris signature. There is one teeny tiny spot there. This is a good bit to the west of the east of the Ward area, and that is what's being cited as evidence that there is at least a brief tornado touchdown, or at least some debris being put into the air from this section of the thunderstorm. And again, this is over the forested area, so pretty thick wooded zones, and it doesn't take much wind to maybe cause a few of those tree-related pieces of matter to be moved around in a very strong wind gust. So that is the zone based on the debris tracker mode. It doesn't really blend in very well with actual radar data that shows strong twisting motion, but there is enough in there to at least get the upgrade on the warning status to what is considered a confirmed tornado here along the Leon-Wakulla County line over the forested landscape, based on what we're seeing with the debris tracker mode of the radar. So we'll put a quick little section of this into a storm tracker to try to determine how close it can get and how soon to the 267 and Highway Spring Hill Road intersection there. So approximately there, moving at about 35-ish miles per hour and just right along the county line. So it's moving pretty quickly. So an estimated time of arrival in that Helen Tower area will be in about 15 minutes. I'd probably say about 10 to 15 minutes based on its current speed. And again, you have rain within this region right now. It does not mean you have the section of this big mass that is potentially tornadic. So it can be misleading. If you have the rain and nasty weather right now, it does not necessarily mean you have imminent tornado concerns. But if this were to continue to straddle along the state line, or county line rather, we can perhaps see some areas around Ivan on the south edge, maybe around Wakulla Springs towards the top of the hour, and then even towards the Woodville, Lutterlow, Vereen vicinity around 6 o'clock. So there is still that possibility where we can see some of these individual pockets of storminess continue to cause some local issues, even when it comes to the tornado risk. It's going to be a lower risk in comparison to what we had a couple of hours ago, but nonetheless, when we get the winds coming in such a manner that kind of mix in with the downfall of the heavy rain and maybe a little backside of the twist within a few of these individual zones, that's where we can see maybe just one of those quick individual points where we can see a tornado spin up very very quickly. Now, the fortunate thing about this, if there is anything fortunate about tornado warnings, is that, again, this is over mostly a very sparsely populated area and mostly forested landscape. But as it approaches 267, I believe there's a Forest Service office within that range. There's also some neighborhoods right around the southern extent of Spring Hill Road where it meets with 267. So there will be some neighborhoods and communities and streets and homes and such that will be at least in the path of this suspected tornado, which does have the capability of picking up some of that debris based on what we've seen. But it's, again, one of those more isolated occurrences where the shear rates, at least when we go off of the different analysis tools that we have here at First to Know Weather, they're not really picking up on the concentrated point of where we're seeing strong circulation. But it is contained within a broader field of strong gusty winds. So that is going to be one of the main effects that we can encounter from this tornado-warned thunderstorm. It does not have to produce a tornado to cause any damage or structural issues when it comes to things that are being pushed around by the wind, whether it's a straight line wind pattern or maybe something that is actually in contact with the ground when it comes to a tornado. So just based on some of the evidence on the radar as it moves towards the east along the county line between Leon and Wakulla, we can see it maybe head towards Highway 267. The end of the tornado warning zone meets right close to Spring Hill and 267. So again, near the Hilliardville, I'd say perhaps even beyond that point, near the New Light Church Road, this zone will be within that range there in northern Wakulla County over the next 15 to 20 minutes. So in case you are within this region, I know there's a lot of stuff going on right now, especially when it comes to heavy rain across the entire region, but there is that one specific zone here of possible tornadic activity, a little different caliber from what we had earlier in the afternoon around Hosford, but still, there's going to be some occurrences, and that's the main reason why we continue with our severe thunderstorm watch zone, because any of these individual zones within these stronger pockets of rain and gusty winds, you can get a little localized twist that can maybe cause a quick tornado to develop within some of these individual zones. Plus, there's a broader extent, if I may, going back in time. We'll do a little loop on here, and I'll show you a little feature that's being monitored here. There's a little broader spin, not necessarily tornadic, but a little cyclonic, if you will, a little storms, counterclockwise circulation based on the original mass of strong gusty winds coming out, and it's causing a little bit of a backspin right around the Liberty and Gadsden County area. So that's caused that, we call that a wake low, and it's just those winds that are gusting way out in front of this main mass that can maybe enhance at least a little bit of extra spinning motion, especially on that southeastern quadrant, if you will, which can maybe cause, again, those local zones of a little extra spin. As brief as it is, it could still happen. If you've watched our hurricane coverage over the years, and you might hear about the right side of the eye wall moving in, and the right side is where we have the nastiest weather. It's not exactly the same, but the concept is similar. It's counterclockwise circulation, a little extra spin on that southeastern side. So that is not necessarily a surprise that we can have at least a quick forming brief tornado that can develop, especially within this portion here around the Leon-Wakulla County line, and it's moving fairly rapidly. So what was already a few miles to the east at the original point of the tornado warning, already becoming a little closer to sections of the Bloxham cutoff region and approaching the Helen vicinity. So we'll go back with some of our shear tracker modes, and there is at least a modest amount, and again, mostly over the forest, but there are some roadways that connect to some of those heavily wooded areas. And then again, as you move towards Bloxham cutoff itself, you start getting into a little bit more of lightly populated areas with a few neighborhoods and subdivisions and whatnot that are included here just south of the Wakulla-Leon County line. So with this little spinning area based on the shear rates and some of the raw data that we use to analyze wind patterns within a thunderstorm, again, there's not that clear-cut red on green, very tight, very strong circulation, but there is at least the trend where some of the activity within this portion of the forested area south of Bloxham cutoff and eventually getting towards the 373 and 267 intersection there, that's where we can have maybe a little bit of an enhancement of some of those wind gusts coming from this portion of the thunderstorm. So a little more concern, especially if you are around and south of the county line close to Bloxham Cutoff and 373, that's Spring Hill Road. And as that makes its way towards the east, it can maybe make its way into some of those communities that intersect with Highway 319. I know there's the Flower subdivision within that general area right about in there. So this, if you're familiar with that particular part of northern Wakulla County, that's a general guidance as far as where this may be going. I would certainly be on guard and sheltered from the possibility of strong gusty winds. And again, a lot of heavy rain, lightning has been scattered and frequent, but there can be at least a little period of time within the next 5 minutes or so where the winds can pick up pretty heftily, and maybe that can stir a little bit of wind gusts up that can maybe have an effect on trees, limbs, and perhaps power within that region. All right, we are seeing at least a little decrease in the overall intensity of that spot of storminess. So there are indications that the National Weather Service will kind of back away from the warning side of things, but just keep in mind through the next couple of minutes, you can have some pretty intense weather moving just along and south of the Leon-Wakulla County line. So if you're in, I'd say, the Oak Ridge Road area and points to the south through about the Ivan vicinity, Ivan Church Road, that can be a zone where the winds are a little more intense. And then just broadly speaking throughout the rest of Wakulla County, especially near and west of 319, Stop Choppy, you've got some good heavy rain, good not in a positive sense, but definitely some hefty rain coming through you and some associated wind gusts with that. So this will be a particular zone in the next hour or so within this little quadrant of the region, where we have to monitor maybe for some local smaller scale characteristics and traits within some of these individual heavier rain bands that can maybe kick off a very ever so brief tornado that may just last for a couple minutes, but nonetheless it could still cause a warning. And because of the messaging from the National Weather Service that this will likely be discontinued over the next few minutes, we can more than likely go back into our normal routine of our newscast. So when the director gives me direction on when to pass it along, we'll certainly do so. But just keep in mind that we will still have severe weather concerns through the next few hours across the Big Bend region and South Georgia along the state line, and then in the Suwannee River counties through about the mid-evening hours. And we'll give you a whole lot more forecast insights ahead during your main First to Know weather segment.
John Morgan of Morgan & Morgan. Our army of over 800 attorneys and 4,000 support staff have recovered billions. Injured? Dial pound law. That's all. Morgan & Morgan, America, and now the universe's largest injury law firm.
It's about time to watch on your time.